To better understand how something works, we often take it apart so we can see all its pieces and how they fit together. Think of when you were a kid and took apart a clicky pen to see how it pushes and retracts the nib. I think to get better at a skill, it helps to do something similar. It's easy to think of creative skills like painting or drawing or playing an instrument as one big skill. And it's easy to fall into this trap of thinking you either have that skill or you don't. But we can take them apart and split them into smaller skills. For example, for playing an instrument, there's reading music, there's knowing the different scales, and there's the physical dexterity of moving your hands around and actually pressing keys. Each of these things are individual skills that can be practiced. For painting, there's mark making, composition, use of color, understanding value, and probably way more. Please feel free to name some in the comments. And by understanding what these different skills are, we can evaluate ourselves and our work and see what specific skills we can improve. That's where this wheel comes in. I bought it off of eBay a while ago to try and make doing chores more exciting, but it didn't help and instead sat on a shelf collecting dust. So I'm repurposing it by turning it into an art exercise wheel. It will have 6 different exercises focused on different skills that I want to get better at. My plan is to have 4 sessions of intentional practice every week on Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday mornings. And while I don't think I'll always spin the wheel to decide what I'm going to focus on, I know there will be days where I just won't be able to pick. So having this to make my decision for me will be helpful. It's also a nice visual reminder and menu of the different skills I want to practice and get better at. I only added art skills to the wheel, but there's a mindset skill or shift that feels really relevant and worth mentioning, and that is letting go of wanting the perfect outcome. I want to get better at painting so that I can paint work that I think is beautiful and moving. But to get there, I know I have to log the hours and do the work that doesn't quite hit the mark. This quote is from Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert. What is sacred is the time that you spend working on the project and what that time does to expand your imagination and what that expanded imagination does to transform your life. She says imagination, but I think this is also true of our skill sets. The time we spend working and practicing expands our capabilities and our belief in them, regardless of the outcome. Okay, so let's talk art exercises. The first exercise I added to the wheel is making color swatches. I labeled it color swatches, but in my mind it is more open-ended. Really my goal for this one is to get to know my paints better. So it could be mixing and swatching different hues, or mixing and swatching tints and shades of one color. I also want to get better at mixing paints to recreate a hue that I made before, or to match random things or Pantone colors. And on the wheel for this, I was mixing magenta and red and titanium white, I think, and just making little square swatch-like things. This next option is all about limited strokes or shapes. I recently took an intro to landscape painting class where we learned this exercise of creating a painting with only 25 strokes. And the idea is to simplify, simplify, simplify. And I'm not gonna lie, it was a struggle for me. So I also included the option to do a 12 shape painting. I read about this exercise in a blog post by the Learn to Paint podcast, which I'll link to in the description. And it's a similar idea of simplifying, only with shapes instead of strokes. On the wheel, I initially thought of just painting in tally marks, but I ended up painting over them and doing a little 25 stroke painting of the same scene that I paint for this next exercise. And the next exercise is value sketches. This was the first exercise we learned in that Intro to Landscape Painting class, and it has pretty much single-handedly made me feel so much more capable as an artist than I've ever felt. If you haven't heard of value sketches, the idea is to focus on drawing the shapes of the different values you see, the shadows, the midtones, the highlights. Doing so frees your brain from thinking, I'm drawing a tree, and helps you see and draw what's actually there. On the wheel, I'm painting a value sketch, which I painted a larger version of a few weeks ago, and I'll link to the video of that in the description. This exercise is to do subject studies. This is another exercise from that blog post I mentioned previously, and essentially is about focusing on drawing or painting one specific subject, like roses or dogs. I went back and forth with what I was going to paint for this panel, and ended up trying to fit in multiple different subjects, but I wish I had done multiple sketches of one subject instead. I also just kind of rushed through this one, so it was definitely an opportunity to practice letting go of what the outcome was. Looking at it though, it definitely motivates me to get better at drawing and painting the things I included. Clouds, flowers, plants, and there's also a little bird in the corner there. This option is brush practice or getting to know a brush. As a newer artist, I am definitely overwhelmed by how many different types and sizes of brushes there are. So this exercise is all about spending some one-on-one time with a single brush and getting to know how it works and feels. What kind of marks can it make? How can I best use it to do different types of strokes? I painted some brushes onto the wheel for this one. They're kind of hard to see. Originally, I was trying to give each panel like its own main color, which you can kind of see in the yellow, pink, blue, and purple ones, but then the other two panels didn't really follow that. Finally, this last exercise is to copy a master, which involves recreating a painting done by another artist. This was another exercise we did in the Intro to Landscape class, but I first learned about it from a book I found at a thrift store called Studying with the Masters. Copying an existing piece of work lets you study how someone else has executed all of these individual skills to create something. I think it really frees you to focus on the process, on how you're creating, instead of focusing on what you're creating. And for this one, I copied a painting by Matisse from a book I have about him and his work. I shot this video a week before I edited it, so I've used the wheel to decide what to practice twice so far. The first spin was to do value sketches. I decided to do a different painting by Matisse, which I then painted during my next practice, so I didn't spin the wheel. The other time I used it, it landed on brush practice, so I used a small flathead brush and practiced filling in shapes and drawing lines. It felt surprisingly nice to only focus on how the paint was going down and how I was using the brush. I also ended up painting a little zine after, which just goes to show, even doing basic practice can spark your creativity. I've been seeing a lot of videos where people show their art progress in the last year or however long, and I just have to say that I cannot wait to make a video sharing my progress with the help of these exercises. I want to know though, what are your favorite art exercises? Share them in the comments. And thank you so much for watching. I hope your work expands your imagination and your belief in yourself.